Your friend Ben here. Today we're discussing a book that served as a guide for me to crawl my way out of the depths of poverty and depravity in the Dominican Republic and arrive again one more time back home in the splendor and scintillating glory of the good old US of A. So sit back and enjoy. This book is a classic. Robert Whiting's Tokyo Underworld is one of the most inspiring books that entrepreneurs looking for their way can read. It's a great example of the spirit the early American philosophers had of manifestation. This is the ultimate true story detailing what manifestation is really all about. I read this book several times and continued to give it as a gift to my most entrepreneurial friends. In the 1990s, this amazing book, Tokyo Underworld, quietly began to make its way onto bookshelves across America. You know, back when we had actual bookstores that sold actual books that you could go and sit inside of for hours and hours and grow your mind and engage with other people growing their minds. You may recall this was known as the learning process. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime books that provides the reader with true life lessons about making something from nothing. The book centers around Nicola Zappetti, an Italian-American who served in the US military in Japan and stayed after the atomic bombs decimated the Japanese. Zappetti pursued the only career available to him in a country that was hit in a way so fast and never before seen that it's realistically bizarre Zappetti would stay on over there. After all, these people hated Americans, absolutely hated them. Let's not mince words. This was the book that inspired me to open my restaurant, which I discuss the circumstances surrounding in this series on this channel, Knowledge is Power, as I found myself in a situation similar to that as Zappetti years ago in the Dominican Republic. I was stranded after an adversity in a country not my own and had to find a way to open a restaurant and begin a business with no work available. Now, my situation was not identical to Zappetti's. Zappetti found himself in a Japanese prison in a 4x4 foot cell. This is where Zappetti, living in abandoned buildings, penniless, becomes one of the greatest underdog heroes of manifestation. Maybe it's because he was in the army, maybe it's because of his never say die attitude, maybe it's the training that told him when you're in a ditch and under attack you need to improvise, necessity being the mother of invention. Whatever it was, Nicola Zappetti, a homeless and tarnished man in a country that hated him, pulled off an act of manifestation that goes down in history as a testament to how Americans see and feel about themselves in the world. Homeless, Zappetti had acquired some cookbooks. He studied them by candlelight day and night, possibly just to keep from going insane, and found his mouth watering for Italian food like he grew up on back home. Zappetti was a famous criminal. He'd been an early American professional wrestler in Japan and was used mostly to build the pride of the Japanese back up after Hiroshima and Nagasaki through predetermined public matches where the Japanese wrestler would beat the American mercilessly as revenge for the atomic bomb. And not only was Zappetti hated because of this dubious status, he also had a criminal history for his involvement in a jewel heist that he was convicted for that was front page news in Japan. And now he found himself alone there, no money, no home, and in need of reinventing himself. And reinvention is one of the key principles to manifestation. Manifestation is about making the dreams in your mind into real things and taking the steps necessary to achieve this. The key here is understanding what those steps are. In other videos on this channel, we've talked about running where you can run and doing what you can do and have to do versus doing what you want to do. You can't do the things you want to do if you don't do those things you have to first. Zappetti fantasized about Italian food and having a restaurant, and he was knocking door to door asking people if they would invest in opening up a restaurant with him. Seriously. Zappetti had ingrained in him, I'm certain of this, the most famous message of a commander-in-chief of his time, the cry that led the charge of our nation into the battle in the Pacific that Zappetti partook in. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's arresting oration that implored Americans to take the perspective that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And Zappetti was not afraid. He was not afraid of having the deck stacked against him. He wasn't afraid to try something new and outside of the box. Heck, he stayed his course. With one door slammed in his face after another, he continued to pursue finding investors for this fantasy of his to open a restaurant with zero fear of rejection. It's funny, I used this same no fear of rejection mindset years ago as a young man in New York. I went to a dance with some friends and I saw this beautiful model-like woman. Man, she was a dime piece, and she had long black hair and golden brown skin and this long red dress, and it turns out she was a model, and all of my friends thought I was crazy to go and ask her to dance, but I did. And she said yes. And for days after that dance, the guys were saying, "That's amazing. You went to the most beautiful woman in the hall and had the guts to ask her to dance." I told them, the worst she can do is say no. You can't be afraid of rejection, but you should be afraid of not trying, because that comes with regret. If you get rejected, you lose nothing. And often people have nothing to lose, like Zappetti. And Zappetti was not afraid of rejection. After a lot of doors being smashed into his nose, an expatriate American finally gave him the money for real. Somebody actually said, "I haven't had a good steak in so long. I'll give you the money so you can cook me a steak." I love this book. Nicola Zappetti began an adventure now of problem solving that touches the hearts of any person who's had to scratch and claw his way up from the ditch. I'd recalled this when I faced a similar great adversity in the Caribbean. I went and pulled this book out of my boxes and kept it with me as I built my business in a third world country. Zappetti's management of the situations he faced, and not seeing them as problems, just situations that needed solutions, helped him to achieve a power so great that it actually altered the course of history. And without any doubt, that's just what this is. Zappetti, armed with money to get started but little more, faced the truly vexing adversities most something from nothing entrepreneurs face, and did what I like to call shoving circles through squares. If you just can't pay off people to do what you need them to do, you have to show them why they need to do things your way and how it benefits them. This is different from pulling teeth and twisting arms, because pulling teeth and twisting arms is how you force people to do right by you. Pushing circles through squares is about proving something others said is impossible is actually possible. And it's highly likely that Napoleon Hill was an inspiration for Zappetti, as Hill was probably the most traveled and acclaimed US motivational speaker of his time, and his books were distributed in mass for all sorts of management purposes, and his Think and Grow Rich book was at the apex of its popularity when Zappetti was sent to Japan. Zappetti embarked on the manifestation of his dreams with the understanding, the knowledge and experience that showed him, if you can solve other people's problems, the world is your oyster. He'd solved the expatriate's problem being unable to find a steak like he was used to back home, and received investment capital for resolving that situation. Now he needed to build a restaurant. He had debts, and his failure would surely lead him going back to the United States with his head held down. Now, this is where perspective comes into play in a big way. Zappetti was a big picture guy. He looked at this restaurant venture as the next step, not like it was a lotto ticket he'd purchased, and he'd analyzed, if even in a rudimentary way, the forces behind this investment capital that he'd received. He had the foresight to see that there was a demand for American food for Americans in Japan, so he set out to open his restaurant near the military base in Tokyo. But there was a situation that would require him to push circles through squares. There was only one building close by. The area was basically dirt fields adjacent to the entrance to the base. There stood a two-story building with a tailor on the first floor, and Zappetti managed to convince the old man, who was the tailor, to move his sewing machines to the second floor on the premise that the GIs would use his tailoring services and possibly sit, I guess, in their underwear, eating Italian food while the tailor would sew their pants. You get the picture. He convinced the man to move upstairs and said he'd lure tons of new business to the tiny two-story building through his restaurant. And let me tell you, I did something similar in the Dominican Republic. That's a story for another time. But this is how you make the impossible possible. And Zappetti slept in the restaurant, cooked the meals, and illuminated it with candles. Yes, candles inside of old Coke bottles. You do what you have to do, and he did it with success. Soon enough, his restaurant, the only restaurant in Tokyo serving Italian food, heck, probably the only one in all of Japan at that time, saw a line of cars miles long, Cadillacs belonging to gangsters and politicians. Well, aren't those one and the same anyway? Waiting to be served chicken parmesan plates. Now that's thinking outside the box. I often recall with this book one of the most poignant sayings I ever heard, that it's just as easy to think big as it is to think small. And it takes the same amount of effort, so why not? Zappetti began to buy the real estate around him, and lo and behold, not only was he a famous millionaire in Japan and entered into other business ventures, including, get this, a mink farm. You gotta love this guy. Zappetti developed the property around this little two-story wood shack that he built his tiny restaurant in. The properties he owned on the dirt lots adjacent to the military base became Roppungi, Tokyo's version of Times Square. Yes, Nicola Zappetti, facing the greatest of adversities, including homelessness and prison without a pot to piss in or a back porch to throw it out of, became the most successful American businessman of his time in Japan and a legend in the art of self-manifestation. Manifestation, as shown by Zappetti, is not just about wishing for things and then they magically appear, as some of the online venturists are trying to pitch to you right now. No, manifestation is about taking the necessary steps you have to so you can realize in the flesh the dreams you want so badly to come true. Zappetti wanted to be rich, famous, important, and powerful in Japan, and he made the right moves to do it. He played his hand properly in increments and ran where he could run, so he could run where he wanted to. Whiting's book is perhaps the only in-depth study of this amazing figure. This book includes the story of the murder of Japanese wrestler Riki Dozan, how the Japanese rebuilt themselves and embraced American ways to overcome the most devastating of all situations, which includes curing a battered national psyche and cities leveled to rubble, and a lot more. The book reads like a movie, and Robert Whiting delivered the goods in a big way here. This is a book I've had in my personal collection for years that truly deserves its place among the essential coming-of-age books any person, young, poor, and hungry, with great ambition should get their heads into. You need to eat this book up, like one of Nicola Zappetti's chicken parmesan plates. I'm getting so hungry doing this episode. To order Tokyo Underworld, please be sure to click the link below. And if you want to head over to Amazon to shop for something else, please do so via the link below and tell them you got sent there from here today. All of that helps our channel and this program to grow, and I appreciate it. Also hit the like button and request notifications. This helps us to get listed and get into the conversation now by commenting on Tokyo Underworld. And if you found this to be life-changing, awe-inspiring, and barn-burning fun, and you want to buy your friend Ben dinner, you can click on the link below to do that as well. And I found Tokyo Underworld to be barn-burning inspirational, even again now in 2022, and so much so that you can smell the wood burning. Maybe one day they'll have smell-o-vision and you can smell the fire in my mind about Tokyo Underworld. Man, this is a hell of a book. Be sure to get your copy today by clicking below, and until next time, take care of yourself. Benjamin Irish here. In these hard times, unfortunately, our four-legged friends are often forgotten about. Please make it a point every single holiday to donate 20 pounds or more of animal food to your local animal shelter. These guys would ask you for it, but they don't have words. Isn't that right, Zoe? Isn't that right, Zeus? You guys are ready for your walk? Can I get kissy wishy, mommy? Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. You gonna give me? Oh, you gave me a kissy too. Mwah. Love you guys. Aw. Please donate 20 pounds of animal food to your local shelter every single holiday. Let's go for a walk, guys. Let's go for a walkie walk. Let's go for a walkie walk. Waste path. Hey, you guys did so good.